Yay. So we're live. Hi,
Hey,
Josh.
very exciting.
Thanks
Hello,
so
how are
much.
you? Thank you.
Thank you for being here. How are you doing?
I'm doing really good. How are you doing today?
Okay. Yeah. It's been an intense day so far, but it's good.
I can only
um, yeah, I'm super happy to have you actually. And yeah, it's great. It's great to be here. So just to give a bit of an intro, and then I guess I'll let you introduce yourself as well, because I
Mhm,
I like that artists introduce themselves rather than me speaking. But you're a creative
mhm,
technologist who assembles abstracted landscapes and collages with code.
mhm.
So you've been in the crypto scene for quite a while, right?
Yeah, in a crypto time, I still feel pretty fresh, but things move fast. So,
Yeah, amazing. And obviously, you've done a lot of work with generative art.
Mhm.
Couple of projects on art blocks. I don't know if you want to like quickly give a bit of an intro about yourself to the audience.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, to kind of expand on what you were saying, very much into like abstracted landscapes, very much like kind of like minimalist, simple shapes, and trying to build whole worlds out of really like small components or minimalistic components. Really into like kind of sci-fi extraterrestrial themes. Primarily, most of my output has been on super rare since like early 2020. And then most recently, I think I connected with art blocks in like November or December or something like that. So I've had two projects there. One was elevated deconstructions, and then more recently Pathfinders, which was kind of a neat like collector collaborative community drawing kind of thing where the NFT redraws itself and the token data determines different textures and color palettes and whatnot.
Amazing. And actually, I want to deep dive into both of those projects a little bit more. But first, I kind of want to bring it back to generative art as a whole and as a type of art. And just wanted to ask you, what is it about generative art that excites you?
Mhm.
And how did you start in this field?
Yeah, for sure. There are a lot of things that I find really exciting about it. I guess I was going to zero in on a couple. Like, I really enjoy the unpredictability of it. Like, when I sit down to work on something, I have kind of a rough idea of what I might want it to look like. Um, but then, as I move through the process and then work on my code, like by the end, there's a lot of randomized components that kind of result in unexpected outputs. So I find that really exciting and energizing when I'm working on something. It's like a puzzle, and then it kind of unveils this image that I didn't even have like a super clear idea of what it was going to be until it was done. Um, and then like that's one component, and the other thing that I find really exciting about it is just like the idea of like infinite possibility really resonates with me. Like it's really cool to think about one system or one block of code that could generate like thousands and thousands of really beautiful unique artworks, and that's just like endless entertainment. Like you could really go down the rabbit hole on that one.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm in the rabbit hole. Like I'm so deep into generative art. I love it.
Oh yeah, wild. And like
It's
especially on
just
our
very unique.
blocks, like the material that's coming out there, it's like one cool project after another, and it's really neat to see
Yeah,
people using the technology that way. So
absolutely, absolutely. I think you touched on, you said the element of surprise,
hmm
which I think, it makes it like unique. Like every piece is unique, which, from an artist's perspective, but also from like a collector, I guess. um
yeah,
like myself, so seeing it from like this side, it's really really cool.
yeah, sure,
So yeah, there's a whole element of that which is super exciting.
yeah.
And on this, so continuing on this topic of generative art, what are your thoughts around generative art on the blockchain specifically?
hmm
And you know could actually generative art be one of the best use cases of NFTs?
Yeah, I've talked with this with a few different artists, and then I think we chatted about this a little bit in like Twitter DMs and whatnot. But I get really excited about the idea of people using like generative art in tandem with blockchain technology. Like I think it's
Hmm.
interesting as there's like such a media boom around NFTs right now, and there's a lot of like big money flooding into the space, which is really cool because I think like money talks, and then people pay attention to that, and more people get involved. So that's like great. And then there's also artists that are raking in like great amounts of money they weren't able to in the past, and that's super empowering and neat. But kind of like the flip side of that is, as new collectors enter the space, like I don't feel like it's always super attainable to collect NFTs because the price floor might feel too high on something like you can find affordable stuff on Super Rare, but like the big things that get traction on Twitter, like, oh, this person sold something for 10 ETH plus or whatever, you know, and everyone goes kind of wild about, whoa, can you believe it? It's this digital asset, you know? What I think is cool about generative art on the blockchain, it's like you can have collectors want something unique, and you can create something unique, like on a mass scale, you know, it's like thousands and thousands of something, and each one is its own individual component, and they all come together to form the one big art piece, you know. And because it's spread out so much among all these different collectors, like it's so much easier to enter the fray. And I think that's really validating for a lot of people. I think it like kind of adds, I mean, it's kind of like buzzy to talk about community all the time, but when I look at projects like that, I do feel like there's a real sense of community. Like people get really excited about a drop and whatnot. So it's neat.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And also, I guess, like, you know, even in the space of the NFTs, like it kind of like allowed for also for this generative art to be understood by, like, you know, a wider audience, which maybe couldn't have happened without the space, right? Like it gives a bit of a, you know, like a ground for it to be showed, I guess, like awareness of, you know, what it is and how it can actually, you know, be like exciting and unique and interesting.
Yeah, and I feel like, of course, it's like the narrative of computer art. You know, there's always like ebbs and flows in popularity, and certain people saying like, "Oh, is it real art?" and blah blah blah. And that's like, that's kind of a tired question about any art. I feel at this point, it's like I'm very much of the mentality: if you say it's art, like conversation done. You know. But yeah, it's cool because I see like a lot of people like with like Dmitry Cherniak and Ringers and whatnot. Like I used to follow him on Twitter back in the day, like when he was doing like just, you know, generative art on his feed all the time. It's like, oh, that's really cool, and it's really powerful to like see his work get a bunch of traction and all that exciting conversation about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually going into you know, your generative art projects, and specifically your art box project, the elevated deconstruction. So you describe it as a study in reduction based around several repeating elements. You know, can you explain this project, and I guess, you know, the inspiration for it, and how it came about?
Yeah, for sure. I'll say that's like kind of like I describe it as one of my like selfish projects a little bit, like from a creative lens, because I feel like what's kind of been the norm for me as I move through my process, like I think that my work has gotten busier and busier, which is like cool, you know, and it presents new challenges, and like I need to be wary of not cluttering my compositions and whatnot. But it got to a point where I was feeling a little overwhelmed, and like it wasn't as fun for me anymore. So with elevated deconstructions, the idea was that I wanted to create something that was like clean, elegant, and composed, but had like the smallest amount of components to it. To kind of like get me back in that headspace of, oh no, this can be like really fun. Like it doesn't need to be needlessly complicated. Like you can come up with an idea that is relatively simple but looks really beautiful. And hopefully I accomplished that. I think it was kind of a fun project, and I hope it resonated with other people.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved it. And actually, your second project was Pathfinders. So that's, you know, your latest project on Artbox. What you know, how did that come about, and what was the inspiration? What were you trying, I guess, also to convey for collectors with that?
Yeah, for with art blocks, like I consider like the elevated deconstructions kind of like me dipping my toes into it and kind of seeing behind the scenes like how it works, launching a project on there and whatnot.
Yeah.
And then you know, as I kind of like submerged myself more in what was going on Art Blocks, like I was so inspired by all these people that had these, look at how pretty that is. I could just feel like I could do that all the time, not to toot my own horn, but I just like how it looks. But anyway, like I really liked the idea of like, you know, all these art projects having like certain collectible traits and whatnot. So I wanted to make sure that I was like doing something that did the platform justice, because there's so many cool opportunities and things to explore with Art Blocks. So yeah, I wanted like color palettes of different rarity that could be triggered by the token data. Basically, the idea is of it as we look at it, like you can redraw it over and over again. You can pause and reset the canvas and pause and reset the canvas, and you can like right click and save your output and kind of share it with other people. But then the token data determines like the texture of the brushes and the color palette, and then the avatar design in the corner. And then along with like the static grid image when you first open up the NFT. So yeah, like I guess to condense it a little bit more too, like a big thing I was going for was I wanted to create an NFT that kind of mirrored my own creative process. And I feel like I do a lot of this when I'm working, where it's like randomized elements that kind of move around the screen and do interesting things. And then I build compositions around that. And I kind of wanted something where like the collector could do that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So basically every time you click, it kind of generates a new path, right? With a new,
yep.
That's super
very
cool.
different too, like based on like the textures of the brushes and whatnot. You can get pretty radically different outputs, which is fun.
Yeah, I'm just going into
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then it's not a filterable trait on OpenSea, but there is some subtle variations in the brush speed too, so that kind of like changes the how far apart and how close the lines are when it moves across the screen. So that kind of gives it a different feeling too.
Yeah, super cool. Really, really nice project.
Thanks.
And you're obviously, you know, you've been in the scene, as I mentioned earlier, for a while, since the early, you know, 2020, which feels like a long time away. And it feels like a lot has changed. What you know, what role do you think that NFTs, and even like specifically, I guess, you know, these sort of like projects, as the NFT community kind of expands, and as you said, you know, goes into, and already is, you know, very, very popular in the mass media, like what role do you think these sort of projects and NFTs as a whole will play into society?
You know, it's hard for me to guess, 'cause I feel like exciting and unpredictable things happen all the time. But I feel like right now with like the big media boom with it, like I know you see like editorials that come out every once in a while that say like, oh, this is like a big hype machine and it's a bubble that's going to burst and this is just a fad and whatever. And I think that's a really silly viewpoint to have at this point in time, because like artists have been struggling to make an income for such a long time. And I think like with music in particular, like egregiously, like Spotify streams do not translate to a livable wage by any means, or like the idea of having to like work with a gallery, and then, you know, when you sell something through the gallery, there's like a 50% cut they take because everybody's got to eat and everybody's got to pay their bills. It's just how it works, you know. But it's like not the best situation for artists. And I feel like with NFTs, now that people have gotten like a taste of that, like the train's just going to keep on rolling, you know. So I don't really think there's any like turning back at this point. I guess like predictions, I think that like as more and more people get involved, like obviously there'll be like big fluctuations in value. Like some things will be really overvalued and some things will be undervalued, and then that'll all shake out eventually. And how that plays out, I don't know, but I definitely think they're here to stay for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And do you think, like, from a generative art perspective, and like these sort of projects as well that are you know, that are continuously being built on Art Blocks, and I guess, you know, Art Blocks as a platform, but maybe also new ones, like how do you see that you know, expanding in the future?
Oh yeah, I think that's going to be like a huge thing. Like I think about platforms like one thing that comes off the top of my head is like Tiny Boxes. Have you played on their site at all?
Yeah.
Yeah, like the idea of someone having like, coding like kind of a really friendly user interface where people can come in and kind of like tweak the sliders and then mint their own art. Like I definitely think that'll be something that grows in popularity a lot in like the next
Yeah,
6 months.
definitely, definitely. Tiny boxes is super cool. It's a very very interesting project.
Yeah,
Um,
like that's also like infinite possibility there because I feel like it's so like stylistically contained within their little universe they've built. Like everything feels like a tiny box's image, But yeah, it's like how many other things could you do with that? I mean, like Pathfinders, I feel like if I had a more like fleshed out UI, it's kind of like a similar concept. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, my next question was exactly this. So, like, what could be, like, I guess, a step forward or a leap forward in the space to allow for this kind of like art and these kind of projects to go like even further? So, what you think is um, needed, or things that like as a community, as an ecosystem, could be worked on
Mhm.
for these projects to evolve?
Yeah, I think that one big thing that comes to mind is like there's so many artists that have a lot of traction in the crypto art space that um, don't use like generative or code-based processes in their work. So it's hard for them to get involved because there's a learning curve.
Hmm.
So I think like one successful example of this is, well, I don't know, like Brian Brinkman and Nimbuds, like he partnered with a developer for that. I'm pretty sure. Don't quote me on that, but I like feel like that somewhere. And I don't know if he's like if he does much coding in his free time or for his work or whatever. Um, but that was like a situation where it was like an established artist connecting with a developer to create this cool project that was like totally in this artist's personality and in their aesthetic. So I see
Yeah.
more of that coming, and I think like right now it's such an informal structure for like connecting people. Like I think on the art blocks discord there's some connection happening with folks, where it's like less code savvy people connecting with people that do some coding, and I think that's like a goal they have long term to be able to solidify that. But I don't know where that's going to go or like what the timeline is on that. And yeah, like people connecting with each other in Twitter DMs and whatnot, but that's like very informal, it's like not very
Yeah.
structured. So
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I actually had never thought about it myself, but the union, like the collaborative work between like a developer who knows how to code and an artist is potentially has like a huge space to grow.
yeah, huge. I think so. And I think that like that's another thing that's important is just like really transparent sharing of knowledge and whatnot. Because I think that from if someone like is coming from a non code based approach and they see a project like this, it might totally feel like left field or like really out of their
Hmm.
comfort zone. But at the end of the day, like it's not as complex as it seems. And I say that as someone who like I don't consider myself like an expert developer or anything. I just have like enough knowledge to get by, to like make my art. Um so yeah, that's important to me. It's just like people need to share what they've learned with others in a friendly and accessible way so people can like continue to create cool projects and build off what has come before, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I completely agree with that. And is there anything, any cool projects or anything that you're currently working on that you want to share?
Yeah, for sure. So one thing coming up is I am involved with Mighty Moose Art's layer project. He has going on his layer breaker project on Async, where I think it's like 60 artists or something are coming together to do like this project with a mass amount of layers. And I'm
Wow.
excited about that. I'll be included in that. And then I have like my own actual like uh, that's like kind of like my soft async debut, I guess. But I do actually like plan to do a bigger project on async art at some point. And I have like a lot of rough drafts for things like that, but I want to make sure it's like really, really good. So I'm kind of cooling my jet, I guess, for a little bit and making sure I'm putting out something polished there.
Yeah.
And then the
Yeah, async is such a cool, such a cool platform, like kind of, similar to like programmable art, generative art. It kind of, flows into a similar path.
yeah, I get a kick out of like platforms right now where like places that are using technology. I mean, I guess that's like across the board with anything that's like blockchain based, but it's so of the time, you know, which I think is really cool. And it's like, yeah, the idea of a programmable art piece. It's like, yeah, you probably couldn't have done that 100 years ago. So why not give it a try now?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Actually, I interrupted you. Sorry, you were saying that you're.
No worries. I was just chatting away. Then the other thing is I've been slowly releasing a audio visual album on Super Rare. So that's like generative soundscapes and kind of like electronic music that I did it with pure data. And then I set it to various 3D animations. And I'm about halfway through with that. It's set to be 10 songs and I'm 5 in now. So I have like a couple things that I'm close to finish and we'll be releasing soon there.
And when you say generative audio, what exactly do you mean by that? Sorry, why someone who doesn't know?
Yeah, basically what I'm doing is I'm creating patches in pure data. So it's basically just like, how would I describe it? It's a lot like modular synthesis, I guess, where it's like, you know, all these kind of like disparate synth sounds that have like randomized components that you can plug into each other.
Okay.
And on one layer, you could have like kind of these like dystopian, gurgly, bubbly soundscapes that I've been doing. But then you can also incorporate like drum sounds, like kick drums, snares, and all that stuff to create something that feels like it's still like an electronic track or a song, like something more melodic or rhythmic or what have you. So yeah, basically the idea is like all the songs have a bunch of randomized components and I hit play and record it. And then whatever spits out, I do like minimal editing and post, but that's just what it is. You know, it's like, I don't really know how the song is going to move or in what direction it's going to go because it's, you know, all generative.
Nice. So basically the collector can kind of like choose its sound depending on what they like. Is that?
No, not so much. It's more like I'm curating on this one. So it's like,
okay.
Yeah, if that makes sense. Like basically I'm just like composing the song using generative means. And then yeah, it's just like a wave file that's attached to a 3D project.
Nice. That's super cool. I mean,
do like some of the visuals do like coincide with the music, like they react to the music and whatnot based on like the peaks and valleys of the sound waves. But
amazing. And that's on Super Rare.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've released Deceiver, which was the 5th track, and that was like 2 months ago or something. So I'm due for a new one, and I got a couple new things coming soon. So
that's amazing. Well, obviously, there's also, you know, a whole kind of like piece about, you know, music NFTs, and you know, there's a whole space there as well that I think is, you know, it's growing even more. So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of like blends into. Even, you know, as you've said now, like even, you know, generative kind of like music and generative art, because that would be, you know, it's super cool to see that blend in.
Yeah, and with music, it's kind of the perfect storm too, with NFTs and like monetizing on art in that way too, because I feel like obviously like with COVID, I mean that like really took a chunk out of people's earnings as musicians, you know, like not having bar scenes to play in and whatnot, because that's the big maker. So yeah, it's cool that that's something that's growing in popularity too. And I think that's like, of course there's like some people doing interesting stuff there, but I still feel like that's really underdeveloped, like the idea of like a music platform with a bunch of traction, you know, where people are recognizing their work and buying it in a marketplace setting. But I'm sure that'll pop up. If it hasn't already, I might just not know about it. But
yeah, exactly. It's like when
it's popping up all the time. So
it's like you go in waves, you know, like there's the big waves of thing and you kind of like follow through. At least that's how I feel.
Yeah, I'll have like a week or two where I feel like I'm really on top of it. Then I'll like get off Twitter for 2 days and come back and it's like, what's this? I've never even heard of this before.
Yeah, I feel you. Well, thank you so much for taking the time this morning for you.
Yeah, for sure.
It was super great to chat. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the projects on Async.
Yeah, for sure. Stay tuned. They're coming soon. So thank you again for having me. It was really fun.
Thanks a lot. And also thank you to our sponsor this month, which is Whale Street and their DeFi engine that powers the NFT economics. So you can find links and their Discord channel in the comments below this live. Thank you so much, and have a good evening, or well, the rest of your day, actually.
Whatever time it is. Thank you.
Bye.